Do you want to know how to install Active Directory on Windows Server 2022? Well, stay tuned and find out how. Hello and welcome to IT Bible. My name is Connor, and today we are going to go through installing the Active Directory role in Server 2022. Now, I was going to start out with how to install Server 2022, but since I just did an installation of Windows 11, Server 2022, the desktop version or desktop experience version, is very, very similar. So I didn't want to do that. The only real difference is that you don't get when you go to create your password, you have to, it's more strict on what you have to have, which is like an upper lower or two upper, two lower, two special, something along those lines, which is pretty typical for a server environment. So we are going to go ahead and start by logging into our server. I have just done that. The only thing that I've done on this server aside from log into it is I've set the time zone. So the first thing I do on every server is there's a window here that's, if you're doing it on your own, you'll see, I click hide on that. And then I go to manage, server manager properties, and check do not start server manager at logon, because it just takes resources and I don't have time for that. So let's go ahead. This specific server is actually hosted at Vultr. I'm planning to have a code down in the description. So that if you want to try this, it'll give you $100 in credit, and you can use that credit and test out their systems. The reason I'm doing it on Vultr is because I couldn't get 2022 to run on VMware Workstation. So I figured, let's try Vultr out and see how they go. And so far, I haven't had any issues. Since this is on Vultr, I'm gonna leave my firewall on in a production environment that has a physical firewall. I generally don't enable that. And of course I'm activated. I haven't done any updates because this is a brand new install. So the first step to install, and this is not just for 2022, Active Directory on any server or any version of Windows is pretty similar to this. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to manage, add roles and features. We're gonna hit next. And on servers I set up, I always skip this page by default the first time I install a role. And we're doing a role-based installation, so we're going to hit next. We're installing on this server, obviously. So we're going to hit next, and we're going to go ahead and hit Active Directory domain services. It's going to prompt us to install, or to ask us which features we want to install. Of course, we want those, so we're just going to hit add. And then let's go ahead. Never fails. Never fails to do that. This server is also going to be our DNS server, so let's go ahead and add DNS. And that's probably all we need on here. So we're just going to hit next. Since the previous step added the features, we are going to go ahead and just next through this. This is going to ask us something, or give us some information about domain services. I'm just going to go ahead and say next. I do suggest you read that. Some more information about DNS. Again, I suggest you read it, and we'll probably take a deeper dive into this stuff later on. And we're going to go ahead and confirm it's got everything we want, and hit install. So this install should be fairly quick. This VM isn't particularly overpowered, so it might take a couple minutes, and we will come back when it's done. One thing to note is that you can actually close this window. You don't have to stay and watch it. Okay, so now the installation is complete. You're going to go, it's going to say you need to do some configuration. So let's go ahead and hit close. And you get this exclamation point here in the top right. So let's see what we need to do. So it says we need to promote to this server to a domain controller. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna actually create a new forest. So we're gonna hit add new forest, and then we're gonna make our domain root domain. Actually, let's do Windows. Windows.itbible.net. A lot of times you will have people that say that it needs to be .local. I don't necessarily believe that, as long as you set it up correctly. I always suggest putting it as a subdomain rather than just itbible.net, because if you leave it at so say you're doing itbible.net. So say we're doing itbible.net. Now when users try to resolve by default, now this is right after setup. So if users try to resolve itbible.net, they will resolve to the local domain controller instead of the public web server that's not in our domain. So I always do something along the lines like windows.itbible.net. Obviously you would say, maybe like us.itbible.net for an organization based in the US, or that has multiple places. But I haven't built a very complex forest, so if you have any suggestions on that, go ahead and leave a comment. So down below, we're gonna go ahead and do, for this example, we're just gonna do Windows. We want our forest functional level clearly is the highest is 2016, so, which seems weird to me. I thought there was a 2019. Maybe it's in an update. And then you would need your DSRM password. Mine's just gonna be something like that. This is not going to be a domain only or a read only domain controller, so we're just going to hit next. So we don't have any zones in our DNS, so we're going to not do that yet. Our NetBIOS name is going to be when it loads. We're going to change that to IT Bible. Obviously, it takes the first part of the domain that you used. In our case, we used Windows, but I want it to be different. We're going to leave all our default directories. I'm going to review the settings, which is everything we just set. So I'm going to hit next. It's going to do some prereqs. While this does that, we will wait. Okay, so now we're done. We've done all our prereq checks. These are all warnings, so we're going to go ahead and hit install. The reason we're getting this last one is because the way Vultr does its DNS or DHCP assignment. We're going to go ahead and hit install. And we're going to go ahead and let it install and do its thing. One thing to note while it's doing the install is that it will automatically reboot at the end. So it's going to go ahead and do the restart, and then we will get connected back here in just a second. It also helps if you remember the password to your server, because I have forgotten it. And when you log in the next time, of course, you will have to use your domain credentials. So you'll have to change your username if you're RDPing into the machine. Once you get logged in, so go into administrator tools, and you should have Active Directory users and computers, which we'll go ahead and pin to start. I meant to pin that to taskbar. And DNS, we'll pin that to the taskbar. And group policy management will also pin to taskbar. So if you go in to your Active Directory users and computers, so you only have, so far we only have one domain controller, so that's what's in there. When you add new computers, it goes into the computers container, and when you add new users, generally they end up in the users container. I tend to build out my my structure a little differently, so I will do a new OU of like IT Bible. Actually, let's. So I'll do IT Bible, and then I will break this into an organizational unit of servers, or sometimes I'll name it member servers. Workstations. Users, and then like if there's multiple locations, because we generally I'll generally break those into their own OUs. Again, we don't have very complex ones in my line of work, so we don't typically add other forest members or anything like that. So if you want to add a user now, so we go to new user. Password of something random. User must change password at next logon. So now there's that user, and they are just a general user. There's nothing special about their account. So if you look at their members or their groups, they're just domain users, and that's it. And then I would like to add more to how to make so your default computers, say we don't want computers to go default there, we want them to default into workstations. That's probably going to be another video. But you can see here, if we go into group policy management and break this down, so now we can have our workstation policies or user policies and different server policies if we need them. So create a GPO. I don't really have anything to create off the top of my head, so I'm not going to, but this way they're grouped and well enough that we can run GPOs against the different groups of devices. Say workstations could be broken out even further into desktops and laptops, because maybe we want the laptops to be encrypted, or run BitLocker on them, or we have different software that we're installing via group policy to them. That's a possibility too. But so let's see, let's look at the DNS settings for our domain. So if we look at our forward lookup zones, we have windows.itbible.net. We have all our, so itb-dc, so that's the name of the domain controller that we just created. Obviously it has our public IP in here. We wouldn't want that. We probably need to switch that over to our internal IP, which I don't have off the top of my head. So yeah, properties, this should be this. So that's my internal subnet for this VM. And everything else should be kind of linked to the records there in the root. And then that's what I want to change after options. So we'll go ahead and let's change this over to a static too. So this probably isn't the most ideal situation for a lab, but overall I think it works out pretty well for what I'm trying to show you, and it actually worked, whereas VMware Workstation didn't. So yeah, I think in the next video, or in a next video, probably not the one right after this, I'd like to go into more detail on Active Directory and different setups for different things. I don't really have a plan, but if you're watching this in the future, then at this point you will probably see something around my head, or like right here. I don't know, I haven't decided yet. But I hear noises. But I think that will wrap up today's video, and hopefully you learned something. If you have any comments, go ahead and leave them below. Subscribe. I always like subscriptions. It helps me out. It also helps keep me motivated to do more videos. And then if you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. You guys can't see it anyways, so I will see you in the next one.